All right, what's happening, good people? We back, funky fresh in the flesh. Got Walter, Nick, and Quick down there in the corner. So we thank you for tuning in again as we jump into a new text. Once again, we finished up Sister Outsider and Audre Lorde's Sister Outsider, which was a mouthful. I think we needed a break. She came in and chopped us up for, I think it took us about 2 months to get through that text, 2.5 months. And that was a doozy. Really introducing us to some of the feminist outlooks, especially in the midst of Women's Month, something we needed. So we were thankful for reading that one. And so this month, or this week, we're starting Toni Morrison's The Origin of the Others, which was taken from some lectures she gave at Harvard, and really where she's starting to deal with some of the racial impacts that she was finding in some of the literature from, old literature that she was reading, particularly Uncle Tom's Cabin was one of the ones that we were starting with today in Romance and Slavery. I don't know who wants to kind of jump this off, but whoever wants to kind of guide and lead us into this, please, by all means. Before you go, Walter, I want to read this thought, this lead in from Coates in the introduction, where he's quoting something that Toni Morrison writes, or Miss Morrison writes, about Mary Prince, who was a mistress of one of the slave masters. And she says, even assuming exaggeration by the slaves, the sensibility of the slave owners is Gothic, it's as though they are shouting, I am not a beast. I torture the helpless to prove I am not weak. The danger of sympathizing with the stranger is the possibility of becoming a stranger. That's a pretty powerful piece of writing right there. The danger of sympathizing with the stranger is the possibility of becoming the stranger. And that kind of runs throughout, what we're reading today. And I make the assumption, because I haven't read the whole book, that it's kind of a theme that runs throughout the whole book, as Coates writes in the foreword. And so go ahead, Walter, with what you were saying.
Well, now that's totally different than what I was doing. But I was going to actually go back to Uncle Tom's Cabin. But I mean,
Go ahead. Please do that. That's cool.
Oh, so, it's been as thinking about Uncle Tom's Cabin and the historical significance that it is listed. If you teach any U.S. history course, I believe just about in the country, you'll find that Uncle Tom's Cabin is listed as one of the causes of the Civil War, like the publishing of this book. And it was a huge literary hit, and it opened the eyes of a number of Northerners to the conditions of slavery, at least the way that Harriet Beecher Stowe tells the story. And so in some ways, I have had a special place for Uncle Tom's Cabin. At the same time, I recognize that to be called Uncle Tom in our modern day time is not a compliment. You don't want to be called, as an African American male, you do not want to be called an Uncle Tom. And I had some kind of understanding of that Uncle Tom was docile and so forth. But the way Ms. Morrison deals with Uncle Tom's Cabin in this first chapter, or in this lecture that she delivers, really crystallizes it for me. It's not that Uncle Tom the character is the problem. It is the fact that this abolitionist, this what might be today a progressive liberal white woman, is writing in such a way as to romanticize the slavery. That Uncle Tom himself, in his gentleness and kindness, in his passivity, is the way that some progressives and liberals would view African Americans today, and as if we don't have these feelings of anger and wanting to defend ourselves or what have you. It's not just the aggressiveness of the white slave owner that makes slavery wrong. It's not that they could just be more loving or more kind, and then the slave would be okay, or the enslaved person would be okay. That's not the case at all. And that indeed is kind of what we're facing today, the nuance of, well, you've got, I've heard people say to me, you live in a nice house, you live in a nice neighborhood, you got this, that, and the other thing, as if being in those positions, my passivity, my acceptance of oppression should just follow because I'm Uncle Tom.
So let me make sure I'm hearing you right. So you're saying that folks connect passivity to being an Uncle Tom.
Well, not just that, and like just being willing to, as long as I'm being taken care of, long as things are, okay. If I had a good slave master, then I'm going to be a good slave.
Right. And I'm talking about more so in the contemporary sense.
And in the contemporary sense, if I'm in the middle class, if I'm being taken care of by corporate America or whoever, if my white slave owner, that's no longer my slave owner, but is still in control, is good to me, then I shouldn't have a problem. I shouldn't be complaining. I'll be okay.
But that's the Uncle Tom, though.
That's the Uncle Tom. Yeah. And that's a problem. But see, that's what I'm saying. That's the problem. That's what's romanticizing the situation. When the problem is that we're still under the thumb. We're still not being treated as men or human beings, men and women. We're not getting that.
Right.
And so what Harriet Beecher Stowe actually does, now again, in some ways what she did was I don't want it to be lost that what she was a true abolitionist. She believed slavery was wrong. But kind of like Abraham Lincoln still sold black people of African descent short. The characters she creates, the pickaninny for children, that is a stereotype that carries forward. I mean, I don't hear people using that word any longer, but you could think about children being labeled early on in their educational career as learning disabled, as hyper or ADHD, and all these other things that are labeled on the people based on this idea that black children are just wilder. They're pickaninnies. They got this thing where they have to act. That comes out of Uncle Tom's Cabin. These and Sambo and Uncle Tom, all these characters that keeps people of African descent from being full human beings. That's the downside of that novel.
But Ms. Morrison also talks about that with the scientist that she pulls from in the text. I can't remember his name, but she talks about drapetomania and that other word I couldn't pronounce. Yeah. But y'all remember the word where she's talking about.
I know what you're talking about.
Yeah, you know that word. It was like I've never seen this word before. I had to actually look it up because she was saying that the brain produces this type of anesthesiology or this anesthesia that that kind of says, hey, Black folks are going to behave this way because that's in their nature. This is what this particular scientist says. And this, as we've talked about with W.E.B. Du Bois is debunking this type of pseudoscience throughout the souls of Black folks, because he says this is BS. And Miss Morrison is saying the same exact thing in our contemporary setting. And she's a better writer than Du Bois. which makes it more palatable that she is saying this is the thing that should not be, because what happens is when this type of information is disseminated, white races and Black folk who have latched on to this Uncle Tom concept, they grab hold of this information and say, see, this is why Black folk are acting like this. And so that initial comment that I was reading is that, you know, when you start to buy into the stranger motif, you tend to say, okay, these folks are not as bad as they appear to be. And you start to think that slavery then was not as bad as what it was. Because look, they out there dancing and they enjoying what they're doing. No, they doing that because if they don't come out here and figure out a way to say we have to cultivate joy some way in the midst of this. This ain't about us enjoying it. This is about, yeah, we really out here figuring out a way how we gonna slice your neck.
You know, I was watching this dope. It was a segment I saw on the internet, and this guy was telling us, he's kind of explaining about cross-racial appointments. And then the subject came up about, you know, where in terms of white people never had, like they could enter into the Black community. Segregation wasn't for them, it was just for us. And so again, there is no real perspective that you have when you're never denied certain things. So how can you say that this is okay when you've never had to be without? It's just like, you know, to hunger. I mean, we have a whole lot, but I don't think I know what poverty really is. I may have to have ketchup and noodles on Thursday before Mom got paid, but I don't know what it is not to eat. So who am I to tell somebody? Well, you know, because I like when people say, well, they got a stimulus check. Well, they don't need no money for food because they already get food stamps. Like, you know, who are you to say that? Or even when people try to do, well, you don't need to do that with their food stamps. Nobody's telling you what to do with your check. Like, it's like you don't have a perspective. And so you latch on to that as a way to usurp your guilt, in my opinion. Like, well, it's not that bad. Now, you know, hey, that Brian fella, he might be a slave, but man, he can read. You know, and that's not good. And that goes back to what Sister Dr. Laura was saying about when we don't see the wholeness of a person. Like, you don't, you know, a person can't even be authentic with you because you have this presupposition of what they should already be. You know, like, I mean, like you said, Walter said, you know, you got a nice house, man, look, your daughter's going to college or you know, stuff like that. Like, that's crazy. How you gonna minimize my American dream?
Oh, the American dream, huh?
The American dream. I digress.
Well, I don't want us to go too quickly away from the acclaimed, prominent scientist. That just wasn't a run-of-the-mill scientist that she is quoting. That is, what did she say? This is in the New Orleans Medical and Surgical Journal.
Dr. Cartwright.
This is not, you know, Science Digest. Right. This is a serious, This is a serious, respected academic journal that other scientists are reading, respecting, and accepting as true science. It's not pseudoscience. Ms. Morrison makes the point. It's not pseudoscience. This is not
right.
National Enquirer type of stuff. This is hard science.
Well, Walter, it is pseudoscience, but he's presented it as if it's not.
What I mean to say, you're absolutely, well, we know today it's pseudoscience.
Right.
And I'm wondering what today, 50 years or 100 years from now, is going to be pseudoscience.
Oh.
You get where I'm going?
Right.
What today are we accepting that is true? It is an undeniable truth that this is what 50 or 100 years from now, people are going to be saying, I can't believe they ever believed that about people of African descent.
Right.
That they ever said those things out of their mouth and were serious about them.
So and the danger of that,
that's
Walter,
the point I'm making.
And the point you're making, the danger of that is, so all the people that were writing as contemporaries or people that came prior to this science, they're writing based upon this. So it's perpetuated over and over again. They're teaching it in their institutions because it's considered science. They're writing about it. You see what I'm saying? Like, so that's the danger of it, because now it's education. It's their and when I was saying yesterday about you can be educated and still be wrong. Just because you know it doesn't mean it's right.
And it becomes true.
Right.
It's
true. That's true. That's it becomes true. Let me get this in, Nick, and then I come to you right.
All right.
This is Toni, that our resident Strother. Please stop blowing kisses to that person.
Hey, y'all get a room.
Wait a minute, never mind.
I think this I forget, Brother David, Pastor David, that's Macedonia United Methodist Church.
Yeah. Reverend D.
Yeah, good evening, brothers. And then Scott asked this question. Let me read it from, I can't read it from there because you can't see it all, but let me go back out and
you want me to read it or somebody else?
Well, you can see it. I see it.
He says, can you discuss the Uncle Tom character and his failure to connect with the slaves? Say that Douglas worked with and the behaviors of Sandy, who exposes the plan to escape with fear, Bill, who plays the fool in the fight between Douglas and Covey. I find the whole character of Uncle Tom to be outside of my reading, but rather wholly developed to present a benign African-American character of white liberals who detested black skin, whoever the character. Uncle Tom would know his place after. Now he's talking about, Frederick Douglass, when Frederick Douglass was taken to another plantation, to the place where they kind of prepared slaves and put them through this particular, it's a word for it, I just can't recall it right now. But he's put them in the place with Covey, and Douglas pops him in the mouth, and Covey says Covey doesn't do anything after that because he knows he don't want that smoke with Douglas, because Douglas wears his tail out. They get into a fight, and Covey's supposed to be the dawn of slave breaking at the time, but Douglas puts a beating on him. So I guess what Scott is asking, how does that Uncle Tom play into that whole picture? When I'm supposing, how I interpret the question, what does it mean when black folk fight back in the face of an Uncle Tom character? And I think this kind of starts off with what you were saying earlier, Walter, that the Uncle Toms, when one is passive, they're deemed as Uncle Toms. But what is the person who fights back then characterized as?
That's as ill as someone who is suffering an illness. That's what the scientist is saying.
Right.
Someone who is out of their mind. You must be sick. Something is wrong with you. And not to get too far off track, I'm reading the most recent, I believe, biography of Frederick Douglass, and there's some other things that I wasn't aware of, but one of the things that is clear in this biography is the break that what finally led Frederick Douglass to break with William Lloyd Garrison was that Garrison kept leaning on this moral suasion argument. Let's just, let's appeal to the moral, sensibilities of white people. And Douglass, after a while, you talked about that fight is brought up in his fighting back against the overseer who's trying to break him is brought up in that biography. And eventually, he has to stick with Garrison for longer than he wanted to because he needed the money. But eventually, Douglass begins to speak the way he wants to speak. He stops just appealing to moral suasion and begins to speak about the brutality just head on and say, no, this is what it is. And I can't continue to be passive. I can't continue to play the benign good Negro. I've got to speak my heart. And I'm not finished the biography, but that's kind of where that's going. I believe that answers Mr. Miller's question there.
He says someone who is ill, not in their right mind, that is what Jesus' own family said about him, a coping mechanism to avoid self-destruction. So this is what this Dr. Cartwright labeled as drapetomania when folks in their right mind says, I don't want to tolerate this abuse anymore, so I am going to leave. So Dr. Cartwright developed this pseudoscience to say that this is wrong, that people who are just trying to do self-preservation survive. Now it is labeled as an illness. In our culture, it'll be on the DSM-5 or the DSM-4 rather,
right?
Category 3, Axis 1, or some kind of food stuff like that. You know what I mean? Go ahead, Nick.
And that is the sickness of today. If listen to some of the land, it ain't nothing wrong with me. Ain't nothing wrong with the slave owner who is actually separating families.
Right.
You mean human beings?
Killing people, getting all the work they can out of someone, and then saying, no, we're not going to pay you workers' comp, or we're going to find loopholes to do all of that. They're saying, no, ain't nothing wrong with us. Something wrong with y'all for wanting us to do the right thing, to do the thing that would be humane. That is the same argument.
Listen to this. Listen to this phrase right here. Ms. Morrison says this. This terms right here, not recognizably human. Now, what in the Sam Hill would make a person think that? Not recognizably human. This is what this is Miss Morrison take outlook of what she sees from reading Dr. Cartwright's perception of drapetomania. They're looking at us as not recognizably human.
Right.
Go ahead, Nick.
Go ahead, Nick.
Go ahead, Nick.
Go ahead, Nick.
Well, no, we covered, or you hit on that DSM-4, and just reading, I think back to the educational system and how they immediately prescribe our kids because they are energetic or because they are, they prescribe it as hyper. But I mean, you can't. I think it's a thing of really realizing how to attract and attach to each individual kid. But because you don't want to spend the time to really understand the child, well, we just gonna send them to the doctor's office or to the nurse's office, and they just gonna put them on one of them strong pills, so they'll just come in here and just sit down. They're not learning anything because they're so out of it. Or you send them to the resource hallway. And I don't know. I guess my question is to the group of us for a discussion. What do you call the parent who does this and allows this and not fight to say there's nothing really wrong with my child,
Oh,
and my child's not taking that.
You call it
and I know that's a loaded gun. I know I just put a loaded gun on the table.
No, it's not necessarily. I won't say it's a loaded gun, because I think as a black parent, I've had this happen, and I don't want to get bogged down in that right there too much. And then we're gonna move to Brother David and Scott's question. So hold tight for a second. But I was thinking about this just today, because it's more than just being hyper. It is a tool also to persuade our kids not to be excellent. Because I mean, y'all know my daughter. She has my personality to a certain degree. She may not be as loud and brash as I am, but she's brilliant, of course. So when she went to a predominantly white elementary school, they said that she had a learning disorder, and they wanted to put her into remedial classes because she had a learning disorder that she couldn't read. But the fact of the matter is, she read 3 grades higher than what she was in. She was in the 3rd grade, but in math, she tested for like a 10th grader. So the point is, they wanted to put her in the remedial classes because she did so well. And it was a way to depress her so that she would not excel. And she told me, this is my daughter, she says, we didn't tell you this because we knew how you would respond. Because we know you don't take that. Because if I come in there, the whole conversation switches. So my daughter went a whole school year, and I'm thinking she's doing well and she's doing excellent, because her grades still were A's and B's, but mentally she was suffering. And she later told me this, and her mother, they later told me that, we couldn't tell you that because we didn't want you to come into the school and overreact. And so you have to, it's one of these things of, did they play me? Were they the Uncle Tom? Or was it, we're finding a way to protect you, because if you come in this school, in this predominantly white, affluent school in Marietta, Georgia, we know how you're going to respond to this. And so I think in a sense, it is this loaded question, but I also think it is something that Black kids who are doing well in predominantly white schools, with teachers who don't nurture that excellence, they deal with on a consistent basis. And Malcolm Gladwell actually did on his podcast, he talked about this with a Harvard professor. And the Harvard professor says this happens more times than we realize in America.
Yeah, but what's that word you used that Ms. Morrison said? What was the word? What was the phrase we just used about?
Unrecognizably human.
Okay. So understand this. The power of image and the power of education. So for an example, to us, when we saw Emmett Till, that was horrible, right? But to some, all right, hear me out now. To some, that is what they thought of him before he was actually murdered. And so people see that imagery. So when you're subhuman, give me an example. If you like chicken, you say, okay, this is how chicken looks. But then you got to look at the raw chicken like, well, no, my mind is here. When you have to deal with real, this is how this comes to be. So I don't even want to talk about how the chicken got to the plate. This is just how I see it. And the imagery and what you process mentally of how this is the origins of why racism is so deeply entrenched. It's about how people see things. If you're subhuman, you think like, and if you're not that way, you can't see what others see. That's why the conversation is so difficult to even broach with someone who doesn't see us, no matter how much you talk, they still don't see it because of what's indelible in their mind of what it should be. It can't be what it is because it ain't what it ain't. If that makes sense. And that
Yeah.
is, I'm saying that is an issue. And so when you see, well, no, there's no way she could be reading at this level. That can't be, so that ain't what it ain't. So I gotta justify here. That's not normal. Like, the normal. That image in the mind works. The way you think about it. Have you ever drank some water or Sprite and you thought it was the other one? And for a minute, your mind actually thought it was until it got down and like, wait a minute, it's not really what I thought. But my mind, oh, this is Sprite. Like if I thought, okay.
It's like cube steak and liver.
Yeah, that's a good one. Oh man, boy, that's a good one. Oh my God. That's happened to me so many times. Even you got the gravy on it, and you're like, man, whoa, what? Wait a minute, this ain't cube steak. But that's, the mind is powerful, which is where the origins of racism, sexism, xenophobia, all this starts in the mind, and then it's acted out in our behaviors.
Well, that goes. I think about. I can't remember. It was some kind of. It was some kind of magic, something on Netflix. And it was the whole experiment of putting your hand behind the wall, and then they put in the fake hand, and they're rubbing the fake hand, and then they're rubbing your hand. And then all of a sudden they smash the fake hand with the hammer, right. And you jump.
Right.
You've been so conditioned to think that.
Right. Yeah.
Like, and so it's that dehumanization of a certain demographic of people,
and that is one of the things I think why the romancing slavery is so profound that she would entitle this particular lecture or talk that, because she is really attacking profound literature. It'd be different if it was historical data, but she's coming at things as Walter, when his initial comment, says that this is sitting before people for years and years and years. This literature has been read by many, and Miss Morrison is saying, look, we need to do a new interpretation of what these characters are really saying and what they really mean today.
But then I question how much, even from Dr. Cartwright, how much of scientific study today has been influenced by Dr. Cartwright, and is not. It's almost like when you learn something new, you go back and look at what was, and you I don't want to say retest it, but you rehash it. You don't take it completely as what it like, because if this came to be, something had to be missing in what we were dealing with. Like I don't know if that makes sense, but it's like, how do you continue to take it as law as technology grows, as we learn more, we get deeper understanding of certain things, but we still take these old facts, or what we consider old facts, as law and continue to build off of it and not really question it.
Not if you are a true scholar. When I was in education, every 5 years our certification had to be renewed. Right. Every 5 years, I had to show that I have continuing education as a United Methodist full elder. Every 4 years, I have to have certain number of continuing education credits. If you are a true scholar, you're not simply sitting on what you knew. No, you are continually growing, continually learning more, because if you are a true scholar, if you're true about learning and growing, developing, you know that the more you answer a question, that opens up 4 or 5 other different questions.
Exactly.
Right.
As soon as you read it. And the other point I will make about Harriet Beecher Stowe's writing Uncle Tom's Cabin, she draws from a number of different influences, but the major influence is the writings, the autobiography of a African who escaped slavery by the name of Josiah Henson. And in Josiah Henson's autobiography, there is no Sambo, there is no Pickaninnies, there are no Uncle Toms. So, but instead of us teaching Josiah Henson's book, Tone,
Preach about it.
talk about the million, and obviously, I mean, when you sell 1 million copies, when you are the second most sold book behind the Bible
right,
for your time, then obviously I'm not downplaying what Miss Harriet Beecher Stowe was able to accomplish, but I've always been taught that if you want to know something, you go to the primary source. And if she draws, and not everybody, but a lot of folks know that she is drawing largely from Josiah Henson's autobiography. If you know that, then why not go and teach Josiah Henson right beside it, at least, you know?
The truth is a mother, ain't it? Let me get some of these questions here. Brother David says, do you think that we are still at the same point because we have bought into only having one truth? Well, then and now we needed both. We needed both Douglas and Du Bois, so we need to break down strongholds and raise our floor as a people. Now, I would ask this question, not to get too deep and theological, but how many truths are there? I mean, there are different perspectives, but there can't, because even with Douglas and Du Bois, you know, we're talking about something. We talk about something real thick there, but I don't know if it was a difference in truth as much as a difference in upbringing, perspective. Because, you know, let's just be clear: Du Bois was never a slave. Du Bois came from god doggone Binghamton, Massachusetts, where he probably had more an allowance than most of these folks who were enslaved, like Douglas, made in a year. So I think there's different in perspectives that we have to take into account. So, you know,
different point of views.
So that Harlem, you know, so that our part, so the breakdown of the strongholds and raise our floor as a people. Du Bois Du Bois was such an arrogant person that Du Bois would not even talk to certain people unless they had PhDs.
Yeah.
Benjamin Mays being one of them. He's like, look, you can't even hold my attention because you ain't smart. You're not smart enough. I mean, he thought that Marcus Garvey was a clown, an ape, he called him, with a hat on. He was such an arrogant person. But kids thought he was one of the, you know, with children though, he was said to be one of the nicest people on the face of the earth. So,
but even within that, as people grow and develop themselves, again, that's what I was getting at. I mean, I do believe there's one truth, but as I've grown and developed, I think I'm better able to articulate that truth. At least I hope I am. And I am constantly being aware of trying to hear that truth more clearly so I can speak it.
That's well taken. That I agree. Now, there's something, maybe we're going to have to deal some more with this truth after we get through this, because I think this keeps coming up in everything we're saying. Scott says, truth speaking as illness also, just as Garrison and liberals accepted that Brown was crazy, so many identified the angry individual as crazy as being angry about truth. There's something about this truth that keeps ringing very loudly here. Anybody have anything about they want to address with this one?
Well, but then that's what Miss Morrison is addressing. Like, so this is, again, not to make this about me, but I just talk about my personal response. My personal experiences is that sometimes when I'm in conversations with folks and they are disagreeing with me, and I'm simply stating facts. These are things that can't be disputed. They'll just say, "Well, I don't want to talk about it anymore." It's just there's nothing you could once it's really once you get down to it and you're like, okay, this is what it is. I mean, that's what I love that the quote. I often quote. Maybe I'm paraphrasing now. James Baldwin. He says, "I don't know if it's racism, but I know that the schools that my kids go to ain't like the schools that your kids go to.
Right.
I don't know if it's racism, but I know if I get a job, I'm the last one hired and the first one fired. I don't care what you want to call it, but here is what's happening. This is the truth. You can argue. We can argue about all this other stuff.
The facts.
But here it is. This is true, and you can't argue it. I mean, you can, but you look silly. You're gonna come out crazy because this is what is. Now, whatever you want to call it, whatever you want to do with it, that's up to you. But this is what I know. So,
well, it's just like the stop the steal thing. Like,
what you say that? The stop the what?
Stop the steal. Hashtag.
You made me break out of a cold sweat just now. You made me sweat just now.
I mean, it's like there have been almost 300 pieces of legislation across the country to stop voter fraud, and voter fraud is basically non-existent. But not South Carolina was one of. How could you just with no evidence, none, not a shred of evidence. But like Walter's saying, you just did not. You don't want the truth. In the words of my brother in the movie, you can't handle the truth.
Jack Nicholson.
Jack Nicholson. You can't. What did Jack say? You
can't handle the truth.
You want to hear the truth? You can't handle the truth. And he was just being real. Because I know if you don't get right, we gonna do something to you because that's just how it works. But I mean. The facts don't do it,
Scott says Alice Walker speaks about experience like your daughter's, Brian. Her context was related to integration and the closing of schools where Black instructors pushed students and had expectations. In my experience, if I get bored in an academic or social situation, I act out to entertain myself.
That's me. Hey, Scott, that's me all day, brother. I'm guilty. But I do have ADHD. But that was it. I mean, I didn't get diagnosed till I was 50. Thank God I had recall that I could still function, but yeah.
And they said, Brother David, I would have to say that before you can come to your final conclusion on this, he's talking about the school. He says, please know that there are many other factors that is in the school now. Oh, I agree with that.
Yeah.
But I also believe when we're talking about that segregation is still happening in schools now. And where my daughter went to school in Marietta, this particular part of Marietta was predominantly white school in this part of Marietta was pretty it was a wealthy part of Marietta, and my daughter was not supposed to go to school there the way that they saw it, and I think that played a big factor because how can this Black child who is not supposed to be in this school the way that they perceived it financially, how can she outperform these white children whose parents have millions of dollars, hundreds of thousands of dollars living, because these houses were ridiculous in this particular area, and my daughter was smashing them with ease, even while being traumatized academically. Scott says 451 as of today. I mean, not Scott, Macedonia. 451 as of today. Now I'm not sure what that is. I think that's the laws. The laws he's talking about.
Okay. So legislation. Okay.
Legislation's right.
Walter, you're the historian. Like, I don't think everybody knows the history of the private Christian schools. When did they? I just think that's an oxymoron. I go to a private Christian school, and just the history of when they came into prominence. Can you just tell us a little bit about that? Because I want people to hear this, because I'm amazed at people that don't know this.
Well, yeah, you can look at it's I forget what the number is exactly, but most of them were founded around the late 1940s through the early 1960s, as Brown versus Board of Education made its way through the lower courts and then the Supreme Court. They saw it coming, and they began to plan to have these. Now, of course, there were Christian schools prior to that. Don't misunderstand, but the predominant number of Southeastern Christian schools were founded most places where Jim Crow was the law prior to Brown versus Board of Education, 1954. Those schools began to crop up, like I said, late 1940s through the 1960s. Wow. Look at when they were established. Yeah.
Intentional.
And and now you can get a scholarship to go to one, or if you jump high and run fast, you can go to one.
Right.
Look, it's interesting you said that. As Scott said, she must not have played ball, dog. and she was a cheerleader.
No, that ain't gonna do it. Yeah, cheer. We got cheerleaders.
You're not jumping high, and you ain't running fast, and you ain't hitting hard, or you ain't carrying a pigskin. Nah.
We got those.
But listen. We was talking about, it says one purpose of scientific racism is to identify an outsider in order to define oneself.
Mm-hmm.
That's right. Man, look, that's kind of like hearing Tribe Called Quest, and you don't have nothing else to say, but just listen to it and say, "Yep, that's dope."
Yeah.
I mean, what can you say about that?
I can't say anything when I get in trouble.
That's right. I ain't touching that. Like,
and this is another thing I wanted to kind of ask us about, because she breaks into talking about Uncle Tom's Cabin, and then she asks this question. I'll read part of the sentence. She says, "Yet there is in Uncle Tom's Cabin signs of Stowe's own fear, literary protection, as it were, or perhaps she is simply sensitive to readers' apprehension." Now, this right here, this is very important. How, for example, do you make it safe in the 19th century to enter Black space? And this goes back to Walter's statement about if you're going to talk about something, go to the primary source. Why are people going to Stowe's Uncle Tom's Cabin? Because she makes it safe for white folks to move into Black space with ease. I don't have to worry about it. When she tells a story about why is there a need for this Black mother to throw crumbs on the table to her kids
on the floor.
So that the little white boy can feel comfortable coming into the Black space.
Yeah.
And I'm gonna tell you something. We do that today. I can tell y'all, I guarantee you, all of you all have seen it, where when we get into white spaces, we've seen Black folk, Black men and women, use the white voice to fit into, to make white folk feel comfortable about our Blackness.
You know what, Brian? That's not fair.
Go ahead, I'm just telling you, that is the throwing the crumbs on the floor.
I go a step further. I will admit, and I became more aware of this as at seminary, actually. But I'll admit, I use humor. I really humor. A lot of times, I use it to make the point, but in a way so that folks don't feel threatened, don't feel guilty or shame, or what it is. Humor is what it is for me.
But Walter, I would suppose that you do that with Black folk you don't know as well.
Yeah, but it's not as needed.
It's not, or it's not as intentional.
I guarantee if it's according where you're going though. See, I got to the point in my life where I said, look, if you're uncomfortable around me, that's your problem, not mine. So if I think you racist, I'll just tell you I think you racist. I don't like you. You deal with that. That ain't my problem. You know what I'm saying? See, and you know what? People learn to respect that, not because they expect it. They learn to respect it because they don't have to wonder where they stand with you.
Right. Well, Brian, but in some cases, like when I was, most of my career was before taking my call, I was a loan officer. So I'd be on the phone. And yes, I used to call it my corporate Negro voice. And sometimes when my friends would call, I'd be like, I'm not going to do it anymore because I left that alone. But anyway, and one of my friends would be like, shut the blank up, white boy. He's always like, man, what are you doing? But it would be a way to, humorous way to kind of get that off of it. But I had this customer, man, we talked and we was getting ready to close her loan. And she said, hold on, Martin, I got some N-word on my steps. Let me get rid of them. I was like, what? Did she just say that? Wow. So I got a decision to make. Like when David Chappelle says in that skit, when keeping it real goes wrong, like, I mean, I couldn't afford that. Man, I just got married. Like, no, I got a kid, right? So it was like, she can't, is that an example of being Uncle Tom? I don't know, but she came back. I was mad. I was angry. I added a few more points on the back of her loan, but still, it was like, she didn't know I was black.
But I asked you then, that I don't know if it's Uncle Tom with a purpose. I mean, look. Let me be clear about this. Look, folks, I've often said this and I'll continually say it. I never bug out on people taking care of their people, taking care of their family. You do what you do to take care of your family. I don't bug out on a person who feel they got to steal to take care of their family. I don't say it's right, but look, if that's where you don't have any money and your family ain't ate in a couple of days, you don't know what you'll do for them to get a meal. Because if you've never been through that, you can't say, oh, this person won't steal. You don't know if you'll go rob a person. You don't know if you'll knock a so-and-so out to get that money. You don't know because you've never been there. So I don't bug out on people because they go through that. But I can tell you this, I've learned to be authentic so that when you find me, you can say, look, there's a lot of things I know about him. But one thing he ain't false. He's not going to sit there and just lie to you because he don't like you enough to lie to you. So the whole point is, what this lady says, I need to make him feel more comfortable than her own children.
Yeah.
I mean, that is mind blowing that someone, I mean, how many of y'all had grandparents who had a China cabinet that you couldn't even eat off the dang on plates and everybody else that came around could. You couldn't sit on the couch that had the plastic on it because that was for the real people, the good company. But you couldn't because you weren't good enough to sit on the couch.
Man, you just didn't know a child's place. That's all.
Right.
You didn't know.
Going around
there
with the children to eat.
Yeah.
I used to take the plates out and break them.
I'm still mad at that preacher used to come over on Sunday after church and they
get fed. You got to go outside and wait for him to get his plate.
And then you go in there, you get a leg, some rice and gravy, and some grain. I'm like, man, this joker man, look, he can't even preach. I knew that back then. They grab his hat. I'm like, what is this?
And I asked that question not too long ago in a company of people I was in. What does it look like or what does it do to the child's psyche when you make sure that all the adults eat and the child get the table scraps or get whatever's left behind? Like I would think, like, I was raised, we got our plates first. My granddaddy didn't come home and just sat at the table. He waited on everybody else to eat, and I'll eat whatever's left. And if nothing's left, then I'll go find what I need, whatever I want to eat. Like, I'm not gonna come and sit. Like, but what does that do to a child's psyche? Like, what does that start? Like, and I guess I would say it. I mean, in my mind, I think that kind of begins to sprout prejudice a little bit. I know when I went into certain circles, I used to be mad. Like, what? Like, so I'm not important.
That's a hard question to answer.
Yeah.
And I won't even say so much as hard, but because what it leaves us is I'm trying to think of the correct verbiage here without you going back to Florence and the people want to slap you around. But when you start to do that, kids think, or you learn a behavior that you become second in everything. I always want my daughter, my sons, all of them to feel like I'm important. When I come into the space, I don't have to bow down to anybody. You know, I am whoever, I am so-and-so. You know, when you find me, you'll never see me bowing down to anybody. I'll leave the place. I teach my daughter that. My daughter have seen me get up from places and walk out the door. And I said, now, why did I just do that? She said, because they didn't serve you correctly, Daddy. I said, exactly. She's seen me walk out of a restaurant because I give them about 5 minutes. If no one comes, we bounce. And she's seen the owner come running after me and said, please don't leave. We're sorry. I said, well, no, why didn't your people come serve me? I said, I'm trying to teach my daughter something here. And he said, well, let me make it right. Because if I don't show her that, then she'll think she has to wait and be subservient to everybody. So we always have to make those stands. And when it gets too touchy, I tell her it's time for you to walk away because I'm getting ready to do something I don't need you to see. And she understands, okay, he's getting ready to say some things that I can't repeat to anybody. And this is grown folk music here. Because I'm not above that. And I tell her it's time, I need you to walk away. And I think we need to teach our children and our younger brothers and sisters that hey, there are moments where you have to make a stand. You know, and these happen, probably every day. But we've just become so anesthetized to those moments that we overlook 85% of them because we don't want the hassle.
Well, see, one of the things though, like when we talk about the talk, right? That's not what it should be for everybody.
Right.
But at the end of the day, you're like, man, I want my child to come home. I don't
exactly.
Look, if
we can deal with that though.
Yeah, we deal with that later because the heartbreak of losing a child to some gun violence from an overzealous cop is not worth. You just got to know when to do it. I think you got to pick your spots because it's just not safe. It's not safe at all times. And I know, I remember this, and I share this with my great grandfather raised me. There was a young insurance man that would come by and drove a little bug. And my great grandfather was born in 1910. Used to say yes sir to him, and man, it peeved me off so that one day I messed around and said something. And when I regained my consciousness, I'm literally, he slapped me. I was dizzy. And he said, boy, you don't know what you're talking about. You ain't nothing but a boy. And so I understand now what he was doing as a father. And he was just trying to protect me. Like, his experience with that was like, you can't do that. Right.
Right.
But still his sacrifice allowed me to be able to at least have a different kind of perspective and choice and move on. But it still bothers me. I've even talked to it about my therapist. Like, that just bothered me that he didn't know that, right? Because of his experience. Like, this guy's because I remember and I know this is about me, so I apologize. This is my therapy moment. But this guy was trying to win a contest to go to San Francisco. Never forget it. And they'd come by with the little insurance book, and he needed my grandfather to pay a little early so he could do it. And I was like, wait a minute, why are you paying it early for him to go to San Francisco? Man, I can't even perceive going to San Francisco at 13. 11-year-old going to San Francisco. But he's like, yes, sir. Yes. I was like, nah, Pops, why are you doing that? But, you grow older, you understand the spaces, like you said, right? The spaces in which you can take that for them was way more limited than it is for us, right? We have more opportunity to stand up and make those bold proclamations when we need to.
Indeed. And I think that the talk is something, a good place where we see that. I don't know if y'all saw the last 5 minutes of Queen Sugar, where I forget the guy's name, that his character, Ralph Angel is talking to his son. The son is 11. And the mother, Darla, was like, Ralph Angel, why are you doing this? And he's like, it's time. Man, that thing broke me in half, because here it is, because they're still dealing with what happened with George Floyd. And he's telling this 11-year-old, 10-year-old boy, if you get stopped by the police, don't run. And this 11-year-old boy is trying to figure out, what does this mean? He says, I'm never going to get stopped by the police because I don't do anything wrong.
Yeah.
Man, I'm sitting here saying to myself, now, my 20-year-old son, at the time, he was 21, said the same thing to me. And I had to stop him. I said, but son, you just bought yourself a Lexus. You don't have to do anything wrong. And you 6'1". You 6'1", 270 pounds.
Your color makes you wrong.
So I say, so I think all this stuff comes into play, and it goes back to what Miss Morrison said. But I think it becomes this recognizably human issue. When we start to see that, it's a game changer.
I think you said in the beginning when we talked about pain and suffering, the pain is what happens to us. The suffering is what we do with our pain. And so that's a matter of figuring out what spaces, how can I deal with the suffering? What am I going to do about it? When and having to make those decisions, when is the right time? Because the suffering, it's the deal. You get to a point of suffering to the point of where you say, well, you know what? This is how I'm going to deal with it from now on, because I'm tired of dealing with the mental aspect of it. And so you become something. But I think that then that's when you lose yourself. But the cognitive know that, I'll speak up when I need to, but when a cop has stopped me, isn't the right time.
Right.
Isn't the right time to do it. So in my suffering, and this is what you call rage, Brian, I think, and your definition of rage. So it's knowing that, okay, well, in this point, I'm not going to say anything to this cop, but next week I'm going to protest, or I'm going to do something different with my pain versus, living it out right there, knowing it could cause me physical harm or perhaps death.
Right. Indeed. Hey, we reached about our hour, got a little bit over. Appreciate everyone for listening and tuning in with us.
Scott has a comment, Brian. You might want to take.
Oh yeah. Thank you for that. I forgot. I put it up there to read it. Levinus, I think that's how you say that. Yeah. Levinus sounds like the white boys Morrison when talking about the other. He indicates that one can only meet messianic expectation when one stops trying to dine with the other and manipulate the other to carry the burden of your own meaning.
Wow.
All right. And
that's heavy.
I was looking at something today and it says love carries burden. Yeah. I thought that was a dope line. Toni says, love Queen Sugar.
Yep. Is that Walter's nickname, Toni? Queen? What? I mean, y'all know what you're saying. I'm just playing.
So it began.
Oh, Lord.
I'm just
Oh, you know we streaming live.
I know.
Oh wow.
Anyway,
oh wow.
Man.
Hey, tune in with us next week. We continue reading the origin of others. If you wanna chime in, we'll be reading chapter 2, the origins of the others. Hey, get you a copy and read along with us. We'll be happy to field any questions that you have. And we look forward to the conversation next week. Toni gave a remark. She says
that's the nickname.
she loves Walt now.
Nah, that's something else now.
Oh, I see the S, but I was thinking that was just she just fat fingered the A.
That's
but
cold.
maybe it ain't.
That's cold.
Okay, it might be.
Walter knows what it means. He's like, that's
he know what it means. That's that code language.
That's that code language.
Look at he got that big Sigma smile on his face.
Go ahead,
Ain't cool with y'all.
Walter, I gotta go to bed tonight.
She said, Walter, y'all be blessed. See that? Y'all acting up.
Walter said, y'all can say whatever y'all want to say. I gotta go to bed tonight.
Hey, we thank everybody for tuning in. As always, survive, cultivate joy, and resist and stay dope. We'll peep y'all out next week.
Oh, Dalo, Jack.